Welcome to Soul Brew Liberation Sessions. I'm Bluth, producer and host of Soul Brew with Beth Tzedec Congregation. This Passover podcast series hopes to stir your minds and souls as we explore liberation. On this holiday, we draw from our ancient story of freedom to inspire us in our ongoing stories of liberation today.
I call to you from the narrows I call to you from the narrow place.
These journeys are personal and collective, as we work to free ourselves from what confines us and build a freer future for all. In a series of episodes, we'll hear conversations with different people, folks from Toronto to Harlem to Pakistan, a Jewish thinker, a queer Jewish musician, and justice activists to hear their liberation work, their stories, and their wisdom. Together, we'll gain insights into the pain and joys, the grief and celebration, the exile and bliss of existence, of emergence, and of becoming.
From the narrows I call to you, from the narrow place.
Welcome back to Soul Brew.
Call to you, from the narrows.
The beautiful song that welcomes each of our Soul Brew Liberation episodes is the music of today's guest, Aviva Chernick. Min hametzar karati ya, we call out from the narrows. What is this calling out, and what is the role of voice in our personal liberation? Aviva is a renowned Jewish musician, student and teacher of the voice as healing. She is a queer artist and Beth Tzedec's artist in residence. Her original music is inspired by gorgeous and diverse musical legacies and weave Ladino, Hebrew, English, and Yiddish melody and words into a rich sound journey. She's a teacher of meditation, leading the community she found in Neyshev, and is an educator of soulful Jewish wisdom. Aviva, it is always such a treat to connect with you, and we're so happy that you're here with us today. Welcome.
Min hametzar karati, min hametzar karati, nani v'merchavia. I call to you from the narrows I call to you from the narrow place. I call to you from the narrows I call to you from the narrow place, from the narrow place.
Welcome.
Thank you. That feels like, for me, that's the place to begin in a conversation about the voice and liberation. It's exactly right there in our text, in the Psalms, Psalm 118, right there describing the human experience of every breath, of really every breath, right? The human experience of every breath and the experience of being a feeling human, a feeling being, I should say, in the world. And then how that all plays out in how we are able to communicate what it is that our experience is, that that ever and ever ending infinite expansion and contraction, and how that plays out then in the way we are free to say and sing our truth.
Thanks for the introduction and the invitation and the landing and the song. Ooh. I wanted to begin by asking you around your contact with liberation work, like where that work resides in you or for you these days.
So I want to begin by honoring my teacher, my voice teacher, Fides Kruker. She's been my teacher since 2006. So really, as I moved into using my voice as a singer, as my primary medium, as an artist, what I've learned is not so much about how to sing, although I have absolutely learned that, whatever that means. But what I've learned is the unmediated voice. In her form, it's called emotionally integrated voice work. And through much dredging and, I would say, sort of slogging through and catharsis and sticking with it, the deepest teaching has actually been about the walk of liberation. So I see that as one of really the deepest places of teaching for me, because the voice, it's in the voice. Our restrictions show up so much in the body. They show up so much in the body, and we hear it through the voice. I don't think I knew anything about liberation. I don't even know I'd heard the word. I knew Pesach, Passover, was about freedom, but I don't think I'd heard the word liberation. I don't know. I don't even know when. And it certainly wasn't a term that my teacher used. And I think it wasn't until I started deeply studying meditation and Hasidic texts, actually, or being taught them through my teachers in that world, that I started to hear the word liberation and wonder, wow, I guess I'm going to be really honest and say, wonder what it had to do with me. What do I know of that? And then the question, maybe the stages, what do I know of that? How do I not know that? What is keeping me from knowing that? What is that? What is that? And those are the, I want to say, infancy stages before I come to the question in more recent years. And that's my honest sharing of that as well, in much more recent years, which is not just what is my liberation, but what is happening with the enslavement and lack of liberation of those around me, those in the society around me, particularly those of color and our Black siblings. And had awareness of that. It's not that I had no awareness of it at all growing up, but a lot of me was inside a fairly tight container, a protected, seemingly protected place, protected by rules, and some place that tried to keep me safe, I think, and a place of patriarchy and sexism that kept my voice nicely contained so I would be pretty and sweet and smile and look good. So all of this unpeeling brings me to now, where I would say I feel a bit of a mess in relation to liberation, because it's taken so long to realize that all of this work for me in my own internal space and in the work I do leading people, that we're only as free as those around us. So this work of personal liberation must be integrally linked. And that feels like a complicated and long time journey forward.
The question that I want to ask coming from it, and then I want to share a little bit of Torah about what you said. You just ended by saying we're only as free as those around us, and our personal liberation must be integrally linked. And I feel that this work of liberation is simultaneously an intergenerational, ongoing process that started perhaps with the creation of the world. There's actually a machloket around, it says in Magid, what story are we telling? Are we telling the story of the Jews leaving Egypt? Or are we telling the story of Arami Oved Avi? Are we going back to Abraham? Or maybe I would even change the question, like, are we going back to the story of Adam and Eve? Is this story of liberation simply a commemorative historical thing of the time that we were in Egypt and the time that we left Egypt? Or is it an ongoing, forever unfolding journey that we are walking through as individuals, as the Jewish people, and as like all of collective humanity from the minute we were birthed as humans to today, sort of actualizing and becoming increasingly liberated? And so my question is sort of not where do we start, but if this is forever, where do we anchor? What is the moment-to-moment liberation that we can be working on? I'm thinking about the words midbar, the desert, where we wandered through, and medaber, to speak, the voice. Midbar medaber, the desert speaks, and Pesach, the mouth speaks. There's so much of a voice and of desert and of liberation. And Metzarim, the Mitzrayim, the narrow places, is the throat chakra, is the neck. It's like, how are we leaving the narrows of our bodies? So I love everything you've shared in relation to liberation and bringing the voice into it. And I want to ask again that specific question of how do we take something that is huge, like a huge journey of liberation over time and place and people and culture, and what does it mean in this moment? How do we access it? And even if that's just the beginning to tons of work that we are called to do in the world, how do we start?
It's a project. It's a shared project. Of course, some are willing to awaken to the fact perhaps that it's shared and that there's a individual experience and individual responsibility, and that there's a shared experience and shared responsibility. But the thing that came to me was, so I thought, oh, what am I going to say? Like, how do we attend to this massive, ongoing, and unfolding project? And that is that we sigh. And that's straight, like directly with kavod to fides. That's exactly what we do. Oh. We allow our hearts to soften. And that brings in the teaching that was brought to me by Reb James Jacobson Mazels, dear friend, colleague, and teacher of many of us, who runs Or Halav, beautiful meditation and Jewish spiritual practice community in Israel. And James brought this to something I was at, a beautiful teaching from the Piazetzner Rebbe, the Rebbe of the Warsaw Ghetto, specifically about this, which is what? Softening the heart into liberation. The voice is directly related to what's happening in the heart. Is really in the looking at the experience of Pharaoh and all the language around the hardening of the heart. God hardens Pharaoh's heart. God says God will harden Pharaoh's heart. Pharaoh actually hardens Pharaoh's heart, and what does that mean? And the teaching from the Piazetzner was about what are the ways to liberation, and presence with our hearts is what allows the voice to come free. The voice in speaking, the voice in singing. It's the same voice. It's the same voice. And it's the voice that comforts, and it's the voice that sighs. The true sound that you make, again, like totally crediting Fides, the true sound you make when you get into bed at the end of a long day, or you lie down on your new favorite Pacific blue colored couch. Not that I know anybody who hasn't that, but yes. And that sound erupts, puddles up, as she says, from behind the sternum. It's the unmediated voice. And it is no fluke. It is not by chance that this is the work of my life, that this is my work, because I need it. It's why I teach it, because it's an ever revealing process that I feel like my voice has somehow got squeezed for all of the reasons. I can name them, but you know them, or you know them in your own life. And in no small way did my voice get shut down because of the legacy of all those who came before me and the way they were or were not able to speak their own truths.
I want to hear if you would invite us into the sound, if you gave us a sound of inherited despair a little bit, or a painfulness. I want to hear the broader sounds.
The question is, how do we sing about our suffering? Do we sing about our suffering in a way that grips it? So subtle, maybe subtle, but maybe you feel it differently in your body. In one place, our palate is dropped and we're in our nasal, we're sort of like thrust forward into the mask at the front of the face, and we have a nasal sound, which is also a stereotypical, we're stereotyped. You know, if people are going to mock or use stereotype and it sort of Jewish voices or anti-Semitic trope around that, right? The whole New York thing, they'll go into the nasal palate. We don't need to be stuck there. We have so much texture. We could actually, so Bluth, just do it with me for now, and then those listening maybe will join us, okay? So first let's just take a little sigh. Just a gentle one. Yeah, exactly. Just for you, not like a big theatrical, just like really like a little sigh, as Fide says, like, right, it's like the little, there's that little there sound. And then you might notice what it would be like if you were about to yawn. So you don't have to push or stretch to, so we're yawning right away. Please don't be shy. You don't have to cover your mouth, because it's so beautiful to see the open wilderness of you inside. It's beautiful. And we don't open our mouths in my daily life. I don't see people opening their mouths very often. So when you open your mouth to yawn, what do you notice about the inside?
There's an opening in the back of the throat or something.
Yes, totally. There's an opening in the throat, and there's an opening, and you said in the back of the throat, yes, and the back of the mouth, in the palate. It's lifted.
And my body lifted, actually, a little.
So you felt a sense of lift.
I'm tired, I'm yawning. For those, this is audio, so for all the listeners, there's a lot of yawning happening right now.
There's a lot of yawning. And you might also start to yawn. This is quite normal and beautiful. And don't cover your mouth, Bluth. Let it, it's good. So what I'm suggesting, based on also, again, my learning from my teacher, is there's a physicalized example in the body of tonal legacy from all cultures, from handed down, that people receive. sounds that they then basically imitate. Those are beautiful. There's no reason we can't do them. The question is, are you aware of when you're modeling a fossil? An ornament that has to be just this way? And how is it, the question is, how is it current in your body today? Because liberation is, as you pointed out, Bluth, is a moment to moment unfolding with each and every breath. So if we're singing or we're saying words of tefillah, of prayer, ancient text, and we're doing so in a way that's not awake to the possible spaces in our bodies, actually, I mean not physically, I mean actually thinking about becoming spacious in the body, not just thinking, but working on practices that invite that. If we're not awake to that, then we're just going to be repeating all that was passed down and not choosing to move forward with that which is actually enlivening.
There's something about the spaciousness there, the embodied somatic spaciousness, right? Like raising the palate of the mouth, singing from the place of yawn, expanding the shoulders and the chest and the back and accessing that spaciousness from a physical space. I love what you said, like, can we be conscious of when we are representing the fossils? I'm even thinking of the metaphor of thinking of the heart imprisoned and the jail bars. It's like, is there a version where and maybe this is the difference, instead of breaking the bars, we soften and melt through in between them. Like finding the spaces between what is like a rock. The fossil is a rock, it's very static. And can we find the space to move around those rocks, around those fossils? And they'll carve out, they'll be carved by and carve out the water. The water flows around the rock, so they're deeply significant and present. But can it be incorporated into a flow of continued growth and emotion and new stories and that sort of thing?
It makes me think about the clearing out of chametz. I think the clearing out of chametz as a spiritual practice is one of asking, what is here that is no longer serving me or humanity? And just like spring cleaning, like with Neyshev, my meditation community, I keep saying, like, it's spring cleaning. So think of it like that. It's for the purpose of enlivening our lives and others. What is it time to let go of? So I love your image. It's so beautiful. It's so beautiful because it's about the breath, and also your image has a lot of water in it to me, moving around, that kind of movement of water and breath. I would hope ultimately that we invite those bars to melt. It's the bars we invite to melt with the companion of loving kindness. I mean, it's the only way to do it. It's the only, I think it's the only way to do it. The internal bars. The internal, some people they'll be bars, some people they'll be like a fortress of bricks, and some people just be like a sheath they can't quite, fully feel, or it's just whatever it's been there, been needed to be there for us to feel safe, for all the reasons that we grow coping mechanisms, for how absolutely crucial they are as children, and then all the ways as adults we need to learn to release them because they're no longer serving. And I love the possibility that actually we turn to the bars themselves and say, hi holding, hi you who've helped, keep me safe. Thank you. And I I am okay. Am I okay? I mean, that's the first question. Am I okay in this moment? In this moment. Can I, am I safe? Maybe everybody's going to have a different answer to that, but am I okay? Fundamentally, just check in. Those questions are not going to be the same answer for everybody, but they will be, am I dry, like out of the wet outside? Am I warm? Do I have food? Just do I feel safe in this space at this moment? Great. So it's like a fundamental okayness. Then we can turn to these bonds and say, I'm actually okay. Not only that, then the next stage of that, not only that, but to look to that which is buoyant, which brings buoyancy. And that, I don't mean to push that. That would be like a next stage, but for me, it's essential because I can't do this other work because it's so difficult, especially at this time of isolation, and there's been so much loss. So the only way I can do any of this work is by turning, like literally turning my head just to find the things that lift me up, like the painting on the wall of the two elephants that I got in the market in Cape Town. So colorful. The elephants are nuzzling each other. It's so magnificently beautiful. And I have like a jungle in my living room of plants. When I look at them, you can probably hear in my voice, I feel some light, tiny little bit of light. And that is a companion for any of the work. For any of the work.
It's almost like when we can drop the added layers of resistance or fear or protection that we have, like you said, previously put up in order to protect ourselves, but that may now be sort of heavy armor that's no longer necessary. And if that's true, then we can acknowledge it. Then we can actually shed some of that resistance and those layers and start to seek the things physically around us. Like, I love that somatic invitation to notice. Like, I saw you just noticing, or hear you noticing what's beautiful in your space. Like, I look now in the room that I'm recording in to this little plant. And it's like when we notice those things that then can start lifting us up, we're no longer burdened by the armor, which once served us but is no longer necessary. And so we can turn and then take the things that, like, almost like holding on to a little balloon, will kind of uplift us. And I keep thinking, and I know that you're a person deeply committed to justice in the world, and sort of like liberation in the soul of the soul and justice in the world. And I feel like from a place of emotional and spiritual expansiveness in each moment, if that's singing a little song, if that's noticing beauty, if that's just paying attention to patterns that may hold us back, once we can inflate ourselves a little bit, sort of like lighten up, then we have the possibility to act in the world. And it's the bodhisattva way. In Buddhism, the bodhisattva is one who is ready for enlightenment but postpones their enlightenment in order to bring along the rest of the world, to help others get enlightened, which is to say that they're not totally free until everyone is free. But how do we do that work of collective freedom? We start by, I don't know what the language is, but the inner work that we do will allow us to show up to the world with integrity, with energy, with resource, with the capacity to be compassionate and empathetic. Because you can show up with compassion when you're not being held down by fear, let's say.
So a question might be, how can we walk with fear? How can we be with fear? And I think the answer is to rest. And while you were speaking, I just had this strong feeling like I needed to tell you, I think rest is a very important part of liberation, which is exactly why we were given the gift of Shabbat as really like one of the very first gifts and the primary gift, to remember. Vayishpot, Vayachulu Hashemayim, everything is created beautiful, the sky, the earth, the animals, the beings. Vayinafash, We resold, but it's because there was time to rest, to cease the striving. You know, when you asked me earlier on, what is going to be the anchor in this long journey? And I was like, it's the sigh, which I learned from Fides. But she teaches that sigh is in the place of truly resting in to what is authentic for you in this moment, and allowing that emotional state to not be mediated, to allow it to actually come forth. And the beginning of any of our vocal practice begins with a very easeful breathing practice, soft into the belly, softening the pelvic floor. So not where I started like, let's yawn and feel that upper place. That actually comes after 20 minutes easily of 10 minutes of just breathing into the belly and softening through the pelvic floor and noticing the breath as it moves us, as it touches low back, the mid back between the shoulders. That is your spaciousness, Bluth. Low in the body, creating space, and then letting it. This is my teacher's beautiful image of letting the glass fill from the bottom. And that's the first thing that comes to me. And the second thing that comes is an exquisite movement called the Nap Ministry, begun by people of color and for people of color, because so much of this piece about our culture not knowing how to rest is related to all of the systems in place that have kept people bound to have to keep working. I bring attention to it because I'm so moved by their work and pained by the reason that they've had to come to it, and noticing where do we all take part in that, take part in a culture that we say we got to keep at it and push is not sustainable. It's not sustainable. That's why we have Shabbat.
Beautiful. And so much of what was happening in Egypt was this excessive work. It was Pharaoh putting us to work and work and work so that, his goal was that we wouldn't even be able to multiply because we would just be so consumed by exhaustion. And I feel like the sigh and what you're bringing us to is the shift to acceptance, allowance, rest from there, whatever can emerge. If there's no space or time or breath, nothing can grow. And then the magic of the midwives in the story was that they sort of enabled baby making. And so much of the story is around this, God responds to the crying out of Bnei Israel. Like, there is this sigh, this I can't be pushed anymore. I can't do it. I've hit my limit. And I think sometimes there is this, sometimes miraculous opportunity to get through and to rest, to be in the wilderness, to wander aimlessly for 40 years, but just there's a movement that can emerge from the cessation of excess labor and going and going and going. Yeah.
You speak to movement. So, we've had several words come up here. Spaciousness. I mean, the question is around liberation, but we had spaciousness, and then we had the narrows, fear, rest, and movement. And movement happens, growth happens in the place of unknown.
What does yearning look like? What does opening or dreaming to open look like?
So in 2017, I think, I got a call from Lawrence Chernick from Soundstreams. And he said, we've never worked together, but I want to know if you'll join our company to work on a project called the 7 deadly sins. I was like, yes. It was Yamim Noraim. I was in San Francisco working with Beth Shalom, preparing for high holidays, and I got this call. We're filling out a grant. Will you work with us? Great. And sometime later, I got the call from Lawrence. We got the grant. Will you do it? Of course I will, but only if I can do lust. Of the 7 deadly sins, I want lust. And we hung up, and then I was like, what am I talking about? I don't need to research lust. That's not that piece of desire and sensuality is actually not what I'm missing in my voice. What I'm missing is an understanding of anger in my voice, of my own rage. I don't know what that sounds like in my voice. I don't know how to access it. And so I called back and I was like, Lawrence, I'll only do it if I get wrath. And he was like, you got it. Wrath is yours. And I proceeded on an exploration of anger in this body, which I realize anger, wrath, we could get into a whole conversation about that, but that was my task I set out for myself. It was life altering, absolutely life altering, because what I had to do was go into the studio and ask my body, what is the sound of anger? And as I started to do that, I discovered much of what I think I already knew but wouldn't have been able to put into words. My voice was wrapped up underneath and inside anger that had been turned inward for all the reasons. Those reasons are many, many reasons, including primarily sexism and not knowing what to do with anger, and the people around me not knowing what to do with anger. So it turned in, and that turned in anger became pathologized and became mental illness. So when I went into the studio, I booked the studio, a gorgeous studio, array music, gorgeous piano. All I was doing was having these sounds. Then I was like, what is that sound? I was like, that's sickness. And so the opening of the piece actually it turned out to be this exquisite improvisation on what I called the dark voices sickness with John Farrar on a beautiful improvised piano. And the piece grew from there. And I found all this Yiddish. Okay, I've never chosen to do a project. I've been invited in many projects in Yiddish. I've joined people, but I've never on my own written something in Yiddish. And I was like, it's in Yiddish. The anger that's coming out, it's coming from there. And we know where that comes from. There's a whole history inside my cells. And my voice is contained in there. It's not just contained, it's locked in, and it's become morphed into like all this. It's got not morphed, it's been twisted up even more. When something gets like, you squish it and then you put some garbage in it and then you smush it, and then it just becomes, it becomes illness. That's what it is. When the voice is clamped down long enough, it becomes illness. This piece, so I worked with Firaz, and we worked on what was called the extended voice. We went in a way that would hold my voice safely and started to explore extended voice. What are the sounds of the shriek? Imagine a woman shrieking. And I started to explore Medea and her wrath, and that was where I started with the Greeks, because of course they know the epic emotion, and that's what we're not allowed to express, and that's what as a woman is hysterical. And it's just thrilling. I want to say it's the most thrilling artistic experience I've ever had. It wasn't my prayerful self, it wasn't my pretty self, it wasn't my caring for you self. It was just exactly what my voice needed to express, and it was very true. And I never have been so energized, because in the space of that authentic voice, where it was freed, just one out of all the performances was it free the night of my birthday. In that space was all this vital, gorgeous life force energy. And that is liberation.
I love this idea that the liberation itself is not coming from getting over something. You're not getting over this emotional experience. You're not suddenly happy. It's not like happiness is liberation. It's the opposite. What you're saying is true expression of not only the array of your emotions, but specifically the ones that have been trapped, contained, exiled, not given healthy roots out of their own Egypts. So when you were given a supportive, safe space and you had the courage within yourself to sing or speak that truth, that true voice, and for you that was song. But I think what you're saying also is that you don't need to be a singer for this. You just need to, if it's in words or if it's in sounds like primitive noise, that if you can start expressing that which has been repressed, that which hasn't had the safety to emerge, that liberation comes from true expression.
What it makes me think of is one of my other mentors, Rabbi Sheila Peltz-Weinberg. It really has taught me, and so much of what I have learned for this is also through meditation and our contemplative practices and our contemplative texts, our Hasidic texts. And that is that choosing is liberation. So I notice that I feel tight and I do not want to engage. Okay, so what do you want to do? I can't do anything. Really? Nothing? What can I do? Can I just notice my shoulders are up? Can I drop them? Then can I do that a bunch of times, like purposely and aggravatedly? Yeah, I could choose to do that just to play. Could I choose to invite in a little bit of play? Could I choose to say, I'm grieving. I'm furious. Okay, maybe I can't do that. Maybe I don't have that language. Maybe I don't feel permission. What can I choose to do to notice what is in this moment and to turn to it? How can I choose to turn to what is with chesed, like just a sea of chesed, of loving kindness? And the choosing to turn to it. So in my case, it was sickness and the story around that sickness and what was underneath that, which was anger, righteous, pure, and what was underneath that, which was love. But your choosing to turn might bring you to something else. But what it will do is bring you to the present moment, which is where your authentic self and voice live. And that's the liberation, is just being true to what is. We lift up Elul so much as a time of really preparing for deepest tshuva, returning, the practice of turning towards what is. But this time before Pesach, in preparation for liberation and cleaning out the chametz, the spring cleaning, this is really like the Elul of this part of the year. It's turning towards what is in the commitment to freeing up that which is bound. Sighing it out, having a little groan, being true to what is, taking a moment to just, that's it. That's all it is. Not to hurt ourselves or others, but to commit to liberation for ourselves and thus for others.
I would love to invite you to end with any final remarks and to conclude with a blessing for anyone listening for this Passover holiday. Even the simplest of blessings. You have taken us through a beautiful uncovering of liberation from a place of presence, a place of voice, of sigh, of the body, an internal liberation that is the language of the Hasidic masters. It's the language of the body, and it's one of the ways that we can show up into the world with deepest integrity to fight for and to be in co-resistance and solidarity for justice and liberation for all, both spiritually and materially. And today we got to spend this hour being in the anchor, the sort of original place. Where can we start? With a sigh. You don't need any tools. You don't need any circumstance to begin with a sigh, and let that begin to move and motivate and open up the body into the expanse of what is possible, the hopefulness of what could be, and the capacity to think and feel create our lives not just as fossils that we've inherited from systems that are put on us, but breathe something new into what is. So thank you for all of that journey in this time, and please bless us.
Ze hayom asa ya Ze hayom asa ya Nagila Venis mechavo. May we breathe into the old spaces. May we know that we are being breathed, whatever we believe about a divine presence, that actually we all are breathing, being breathed. And may we allow that breath to move into all the spaces, the old spaces that need some spring cleaning. Maybe trust will be okay to let the light of breath move through those spaces. May we rest into the moment of that breath, trusting that fear will yet be alongside us, and trusting that as we let that breath move and let our voices come from the truest of places, that we are indeed once again immediately in the expanse. And that expanse is what I understand of liberation. So thank you, Bluth. And may it be so really for all beings. Really, really for all beings.
Amen, amen, and hallelujah. May your blessing be so. And of course, Passover is 8 days of Hallel. We end the Seder with Hallel. Hallel Nirtzah. We praise, we sing. Our voices open up in the major key this time. We make it to some place of praise and glory and song that is beyond the questions that we start asking at the beginning. It's beyond all of that. It is the expanse. So thank you for blessing us with your voice and your words and your presence.
Thank you. It's really a treat to be in conversation with you. So nice, so good for my heart and my soul. I call to you from the narrows I call to you from the narrow place. I call to you from the narrows.
Today's episode was produced by me and edited and co-produced by Ariana Skybell. The beautiful original music Min HaMetzar is by Aviva Chernick. Special thanks also to Beth Tzedec for hosting Soul Brew Liberation sessions and giving us a platform for these meaningful conversations. Chag Sameach.
Amen.